Today, I'll show you how to create this fun Santa down the chimney Christmas card. Hi guys, my name is Omar for Awesome SVGs, and today I'll walk you through the coloring, inking, and assembling of this fun card that features a wobbling Santa inside a fireplace when you open it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is upload our images to Design Space. I'm working with the offline version of the software, just in case you're wondering. And what you do is upload your images, and there are three parts for this file. There's the SVG file. This one has all the panels that you need to create the card. And then there are two other PNG files with a transparent background that contain the images that you are going to color. To add your images to your project, just click on each one of them until you see that green outline. There is no need for you to upload the white outlined version and the no outline version. I'm just going to upload and place both on my canvas so you can see how to prepare them to cut your card. So with those three selected, just click on Insert Images. And you will see that the PNG images will be uploaded at a very large size. You will get this warning that says that you need to resize the images to 6.75 inches by 9.25 inches or less. But what we're going to do is just click on the first one. This is the one without the outline, and change the height of the image to 5.5. Make sure this icon, this lock icon here, is closed so your proportions are locked. And then click on Enter after you enter the 5.5 value. And there you go. There's no need for you to change the width of the file. Just 5.5 is enough for the height, as long as the icon, the locked proportions are closed. We're going to do the same for the white outlined image. Just click on the image and change the height to 5.5. I made this very simple for you to remember 5.5, so you can change them accordingly in case you're cutting any of these. And if we put this one on top of the other one, you will see that they're exactly the same. One with a white outline and the other one without. Next, let me hide this so we can see better what we have here. We have the SVG file grouped. There are three groups here: the card itself, and then there's the card base, and then there are the stencils. What we need to do first is click on the title where it says group right here and ungroup it. This will put all these images on top, and you can see that you have here the inner panel, the front watercolor panel, the snow panel. There is the light string, the card base, and finally the stencils. These are all grouped, but they are not attached, so you can cut them separately. Now for the inner panel, which is this brown panel here, the one that will have the chimney attached to it, you need to change the top layer where it says cut and go to the left top left corner and change the line type to score. That way those lines won't be cut on the cardstock, and instead you'll get a scoring line. Then we need to attach those scoring lines to the actual cardstock. So what we do is click on the title here to select both, or you can also draw a rectangle on top of both and click on attach. And that way you'll get an attached group of that score line and the brown cardstock. Next, we have the watercolor panel. You can cut this on your Cricut. I would rather, I like to cut it by hand. I think it's less waste of paper, so I cut it on my paper trimmer. Then we have this snow panel that you can cut this from any white colored cardstock. And then the string, you can do this in green and black, or in gold if you prefer. It's really up to you. Then we have the card base. The card bases, I also cut them directly from a piece of 8.5 by 11 inches of paper, lengthwise, and folded in half. That way you'll get a top folding note card. And finally, we have the stencils. Now, if you are going to use the note card, make sure to change the top layer from cut to score and attach that scoring line to the card base by clicking on the title, selecting both with the rectangle, and clicking on attach right here. And that way it's an attached group of the scoring line and the note card. That way, if you go to make it, you will see here's your snow panel. Here's your card base with the scoring line to create a top folding note card. Here's your watercolor panel. Here's your inner panel with the fold lines, the scoring lines, and here's the light string, and here's one stencil, and here's the second one. Now, a really neat trick that you can do to cut these two from a single 12 by 12 piece of stencil material is, instead of using a 12 by 12, change this to a 12 by 24. That way, both stencils will be put on the same mat. And here, what you can do is just slide this one a little bit up, and you can rotate this one to kind of match that. And that way, if you're really accurate, you can cut both from one single piece of you create material. And you can still use a 12 by 12 inch mat. Ucreate is the brand of stencil material I use. There will be a link to a video I created a while ago for you to create stencils. And that's how you prepare the file. Then you click on continue, connect your maker, and cut your pieces. Like I said before, I cut my front panel and card base using a paper trimmer instead of my Cricut. That way I can save a lot of material. For the front panel, I used watercolor paper. This is 300 GSM, which is about 110 pound cardstock. And I think watercolor paper lets you achieve a better blending when you're using distress inks. It also has a nice texture to it. For the card base, you will need a strong cardstock. I am using a Nina Classic Crest cover and 110 pound cardstock and Solar White. To create the card base for this project, just cut one 8.5 by 11 inch sheet of paper and half lengthwise and fold it in the center to create a top folding note card that we will use sideways. To color the images, I wanted to use a high contrast technique. For this, we will be using a lot of black in the coloring. I always resort to my hex chart from Sandy Alnock. I'll be sure to link to her site down below. And I also use scrap pieces of cardstock to rest my hand and to rest the cap of the markers to avoid smudging the images. Now, for high contrast coloring, you'll need to use black markers. And Copic has two kinds of black markers, number 100 called black and number 110 called special black. They are slightly different, being the 100 a little bluish and will blend better with cooler tones like greens and blues. The number 110, on the other hand, is a bit reddish and will combine better with warm tones and neutral grays. You don't need to have both, but if you want to buy one, I'd go for the number 100 that is more versatile. For most of the images, I used 3 tones of color besides the black marker, and I started adding my darker color first on the edges and determining where the shadows would be, and then going back with the darker tone to kind of blend that in. I decided to make the mantle of the fireplace a little bit more red and the brick part a little bit more yellow. All of the images were printed using a laser printer. This I used my brother laser printer, and they were printed on Copic Expressit blending card. This is, to me, the best cardstock to color images. It's a very smooth cardstock, and it does have kind of like a cooler color, and that goes very well with colorful images. The coloring process is kind of long, even though it's sped up. But if you can skip it if you want to and go directly to the assembling of the card, so you can fast forward it to the next chapter. Once you have colored the base, you can use the mantle tones to color the bricks of the fireplace. This will give you great contrast. Just try to use the darker colors, and you can also use the darker colors of the stone part to color the bricks. The chimney was colored using the same markers that I used for the fireplace. Don't forget to add a few strokes using the chisel tip to make them look like bricks. For the stockings, I used also the 110 marker and 3 tones of red. I kept the color scheme for the candy cane and the Santa outfit. For the white part of the stockings, I used warm grays, and I only used 2 tones to keep that texture that the darker color gives you on top of the cooler or lighter tone. To color the belt buckle, I used a base tone. This is Y19. And on top of that, I added a bit of Wink of Stella in gold. This will give the belt buckle a nice shine when the light hits it. I like the tip that is very fine and that it allows you to color and with great detail. When I started coloring the yellow gift box, I realized I was getting kind of like a greenish tone when I added the Y19 next to the black. So I added a third color. This is YG95, which is kind of like a green, and it allows you for a better blending of that Y19 against that black. For the light bulbs, I decided to do a more subtle coloring, and I decided to use only 3 tones without using the black. And the way I did this was first applying a very light color and soak the paper very well, then adding just a little border of your darker color, and then go in with your medium color to determine where the highlight would be. Once that is colored, go back with your lighter one and color that highlight to blend it in with your medium tone. To color the base of the light bulbs, first decide which color cardstock you're going to use for the light cable, and then you can select a Copic color that is similar to that cardstock. You can also cut it from white cardstock and use a Copic color to color that cutout, and use the same color to color the base of the light bulbs. Next, it's time to add the highlights. I use a Sakura Jelly Roll 08 gel pen. This is, to me, the best pen to add highlights. It's very opaque and it almost never clogs. If the pen starts clogging, just run it through your finger and remove some of the dry ink on the tip. And then you can keep coloring. And if you make any mistakes, you can take an X-Acto knife and just remove or scrape that color to make it more accurate. Once you have colored all your images, it's time to take them to your Cricut machine. I always like to put pieces of masking tape or washi tape to hold the paper in place, just in case. Once it's done, remove the mat from your machine and remove the images, the colored images. Be careful and do not waste that little piece that you see right there inside the fireplace. You will need it later. If you are using the images without the white outline around, use a 100 marker to go over the edges of each image. That will give you a nice finish. Always approach the cardstock from behind. That way you won't risk drawing on top of the colored surface. To start assembling the card, we will call this panel the wall panel. This is the window panel inside that will create the volume inside the card. There is one scoring line on the left of the panel and two scoring lines on the right of that panel. That small piece is the mechanism that holds Santa and makes it wiggle inside the fireplace. There are two scoring lines on that piece. Create 3 mountain folds on the wall panel following the scoring lines that you have. Make those folds very sharp using a bone folder. This is a Teflon bone folder that works great and will not make your cardstock shiny. For that support tab, fold one flap to one side and the other one to the other side. Next, we are going to add some details to that wall panel. I am using a Hero Arts flower symbol rubber stamp and a positioning tool. And just remember that you will need to put your design on that large panel in the center and on the middle panel to the right. Using Versamark ink, I created a watermark effect on the cardstock. And since I used a positioning tool, if you don't get a good impression, you can re-ink that stamp and stamp it again until you get a good result. Just keep in mind that parts of that impression will be covered with the fireplace. To assemble the mechanism, you will need your card base, the wall panel, and the support piece. You will also need your colored image of the Santa and the reinforcement piece, that small piece that I told you earlier. Take your wall panel and locate the small cuts that are in the center of the large portion of that panel. I will mark them with a pencil so you can see better. And then you will have to glue your support mechanism right in the center, aligning the folded edge to that line that I drew there. There's no need for you to draw the line. Those are just references for you to be accurate with the positioning of that support piece. I like to use liquid glue for this because it allows you to correct the position if you don't do it right the first time, and make sure the tab does not glue to the wall panel. Next, we are going to create the inside of the fireplace. So determine where the center of that fireplace is going to be, and using some distress ink and the color Black Suit and a mini ink blending tool, just add some black here and there. You don't have to be very accurate, and you don't have to be you don't have to blend it perfectly. We want the inside of the fireplace to be kind of rough. Make sure the colored portion is aligned with the fireplace, and then assemble Santa on the back part of the wall panel. Make sure Santa is facing down, and on the back, of the wall panel where you put that reinforcement or that support piece, slide the mechanism and then place the reinforcement piece. Add some glue and make sure this little piece does not adhere to the other surfaces. You can also put a scrap piece of paper underneath to avoid the glue from oozing out of the mechanism and gluing other parts. Give it a good press. Make sure it's not adhered to the support piece or the wall piece. And then rotate it. And that's it. That's how Santa will hang from the support piece. Now we will add all the embellishments to the wall panel and flatten Santa and the support piece in the back and start adding your colored elements, the fireplace and the stockings. To position the logs inside the fireplace, you need to first align the panel to make sure the logs are centered on the fireplace. I'm using a Xyron sticker maker machine, and I'm pushing the colored logs inside the machine to create a sticker. It's a good idea to glue all the edges of this piece to the back of the card. That way Santa won't get caught on the logs when it moves. So make sure it's completely adhered on all edges. And here's the tricky part. You need to adhere the wall panel to the card very accurately. So add some liquid glue to the left tab and align the edge of that panel to the folding edge of the note card. Hold it in place. Make sure it doesn't move and all edges are aligned with the card. And close the card so the tab adheres to the left side of the note card. Then flip the wall panel over and make sure it adheres correctly. Next, add glue to the other tab, the tab on the other side. Make sure it doesn't go over. And also add some glue to the back surface of the reinforcement piece. Remove any excess glue using your fingers. Remove that glue from your fingers. And watch closely to make sure everything closes properly. Hold down the support piece, hold down the right side of the wall panel, and then give it a good press. Wait for a couple of seconds for it to dry, and your mechanism should look like this. Reinforcement piece in the center, and there you see Santa moving freely. When you open the card, it creates a window, and Santa can move inside the fireplace freely. And now to create the front of the card, we are going to ink that front watercolor cardstock panel that we cut by hand. Divide it in half, almost in half, just about. And using distress inks, create a very high contrast inking. I used tumble glass, salty ocean, chipped sapphire, and black soot with a mini ink blending tool. I started with the tumble glass and inked most of the surface, especially the center of that that top half. I used some Post-it tape to cover the bottom half to avoid adding blue ink to the roof part of that front panel. Next, add some salty ocean distress ink and go back with that tumble glass to blend that in. Next, center the Asahi stencil and tape it to your surface and your card, and going back with salty ocean. Following the rays, go from the outside to the center of that stencil. Do it very lightly and do not add a lot of ink. And finally, going back with some tumble glass, remove any excess ink that might have stayed there. Next, add some chipped sapphire to the outside and finish up adding some black soot. Remove the post-it tape once you're done, and make sure everything is completely dry before coloring the bottom half of the panel. For the bottom half, I'm using tea dye, fired brick, aged mahogany, and black soot also. And this time I'm using the roof tile stencil that I created. There's no need for you to make this very smooth. Just add it on all the surface. You can also leave a small band of uncolored cardstock. Place the stencil and make sure the stencil is glued to your surface and also to the front panel. And start adding some fired brick. Just tap it here and there. Next, add some aged mahogany, mainly to the bottom half of that roof piece, and finally some black soot, only on the bottom edge. Just tap it. Do not rub the stencil because you might move it. Next, using this wavy stencil, this is what I call this one, and using some hickory smoke distress ink, create some volume to the snowbanks on the roof. A good idea is to align the stencil with the curved cuts that your machine created on that panel that will later hold the colored pieces. Do it very lightly. We don't want a lot of ink showing. Here's the finished result, and you will see that it will look great once you put your colored pieces in front. Start adding your colored elements, the chimney, and then the gift boxes. Flip it over, add some liquid glue, making sure you get all the edges of that snow panel and also the colored elements. And here's where a grid comes handy, a back grid comes handy. Glue the edge of the snow panel about 2 inches below the top edge of that front panel. Once it's glued, add your light cable with some liquid glue added to it. And finally, add your light bulbs. I also added some white dots using my gel pen here and there to give it that kind of magical feel or that starry night feeling. And to finish up the card, I added the front panel using liquid glue. I hope you give this project a chance. I know it's very technique intense. There's a lot of coloring and inking and a lot of gluing, but the result is great. As a bonus, I scanned the colored images and I created PNG transparent background files that you can use to create your cards very fast and very easily, skipping all the Copic coloring. Just follow the link in the video description below. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget also to subscribe and hit that bell button next to the subscribe button so you're notified every time a new video is uploaded. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.